We're in 2025. Is climate change a reality?
We see the evidence all around us. We see it in the news reports. In India, the flash flooding, more frequent extreme heat. Unfortunately, we're already quite deep into a climate crisis.
Do you believe we are actually past that point of no return?
We've already overstepped the temperature warming level.
There is also a heating up of global geopolitics right now.
The idea is really to how do we go deeper into our shared values, climate commitments.
You have a very important country which is turning its back on global warming, on climate change. The leader has actually turned away from this.
The international community can really show absolutely vital leadership that we need as a collective at the moment.
Right.
So we're not dependent on any one country.
The rise of countries like China, for instance. The Russian Federation is fighting an unprecedented war in Ukraine. Climate change, are these issues still on the table?
I mean, we have to deploy, of course, the best of our diplomacy.
The developing countries are being asked to pay for what the developed world did over 150 years of their industrial revolution.
Yes, I hope we work across countries, across regions to find our way through, because one, or a handful of bad actors should not sabotage the rest of the international community.
Hello and welcome to the Sandeep Unnithan Show, your weekly dose of defense, geopolitics, and much, much more. Today on the topic of much more, we're going to be talking about climate change, global warming, issues that might have taken a backseat because of the global warming in geopolitics. And I'm joined today by Maja Groff. She's the convener of the Climate Governance Commission and chair of the Planetary Governance Program. And she's in India on a visit organized by the Trajectories of Hope Foundation. Maja, welcome to the Chakra News and to the Sandeep Unnithan Show.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here, Maja. And I want to start by asking you this. We're in 2025. Is climate change a reality?
Yes, I think as we were discussing earlier, we see the evidence all around us.
Right.
We can really physically, visually, we see it in the news reports, we see it in our own interactions with the changing weather. So, for example, I was talking about my home region on the west coast of Canada, which now has a very different climate. It was a rainforest with rainy summers and cloud. And even from my childhood or even recent years, the past decade, it's changed really dramatically. We were talking about in India, the flash flooding, the more frequent extreme heat, et cetera. So, unfortunately, we're already quite deep into a climate crisis, which by its nature is indeed international. We can only solve it through international cooperation. However, we need very robust action transformation at all levels. So every action counts. We need to reach deep into the local, but we also absolutely need the international. So that is indeed why it's so interesting to think about the international community at the moment and the various trends and behaviors and how we navigate through this current time.
Absolutely. And in fact, here in India, we're wrestling with the effects of climate change, like you mentioned. We have, very unprecedented freaky weather incidents. There are floods, there are landslides, there are all manner of climate change. And this is affecting the people for the first time. Do you believe we are actually past that point of no return, which a lot of climatologists seem to indicate?
Yes, that's a very interesting and excellent question, because it sort of gets to the heart of the gravity of the current conditions in the Earth system. And thankfully, now we have excellent scientific practice, scientists around the world who are going deeper and deeper and more broadly and more complexly understanding the Earth system science and trying to indeed understand what the current risks we're running and what we are moving into on current action trajectories in terms of the climate. So there are different scientific opinions because that's the nature of the scientific process. The knowledge is ever improving and being refined and being tested through debate. That's absolutely at the heart of the scientific project. But indeed, we're past the point of non-return in terms of very serious, severe impacts for humanity already. So, for example, there's a group of scientists and interdisciplinary experts at the Earth Commission. They're not only natural scientists, but also social scientists, economists, etc., who are talking also about notions of Earth system justice, and to stay in like a just sort of context in with climate change. We've already overstepped the temperature warning and warming level. So the impact on people the most vulnerable are already very dramatic, and so. But that's not only the most vulnerable, it's all of our societies. It's even the societies that are wealthiest, the best prepared, that are already seeing huge impacts. For example, the Los Angeles fires, which higher estimates of monetary impact, both in terms of losses and then general economic impacts, up to $250 billion. And this is just to also make a connection with what's happening at the international level. 300 billion was the new commitment of the international community to fight climate change. So our international response is absolutely not proportionate to the risks that we're running, the damage that we're seeing on the ground already. And and in terms of the points of non-return, just to give one perspective from one very eminent scientist who was underlining to me and colleagues recently, every action helps, every degree or a fraction of degree is so important. It's not zero sum. The more that we do, and it is very urgent, the better will be our chances and also our options for restabilizing the climate system, the broader Earth system, which is all of the biophysical systems that keep us in a safe operating space.
So every action matters, like you mentioned, and the fact that that figure is a straight dead giveaway. The fact that $250 billion worth of damage vis-a-vis just $300 billion being committed for climate change work. Now, the fact is that there is also a heating up of global geopolitics right now. We're looking at very unpredictable leadership across the world, which are taking decisions that are not in the best interests of the vast majority of people. And I'm just looking at what, say, the United States, for instance, they're taking steps to dismantle the tracking of greenhouse gases, the action that they've carried out, the EPA. In your mind, how significant are these changes that you have a very important country which is turning its back on global warming, on climate change, and indeed dismantling these structures that are set to monitor climate change, global warming, the impact of that, and the leader has actually turned away from this. How do you handle this kind of geopolitical global warming of a different kind?
Yes. A couple of points that I think are interesting to kind of get our heads around the current circumstances and how we navigate through. So firstly, in the practice of international law, the development of international institutions, the U.S. has not always been a key player or supporter. The international community as a group, as a collective, has navigated around the U.S. and other great powers quite adeptly at multiple instances. So I think there's still a lot of capacity at this point in the international system to do a lot, even in the face of the very concerning developments in admittedly a very, very important country. And on the scientific front, of course, it's tragic. The undermining of the scientific institutions in that country, very, very, very worrying, concerning. However, again, some of my scientist friends who are also based in the U.S. say, okay, listen, we have already, as an international community as a whole, excellent monitoring and scientific capacity. There may be some reconfiguration of sort of funding sources for certain monitoring facilities around the world for the Earth system functions, but we still have a lot of capacity that we can, reconfigure, think through, and go forward.
Right.
I was just hearing from some of my colleagues in India yesterday that the Indian government is investing very much in science and weather science and risk, which is excellent news. So I think other countries can show dramatic leadership, new leadership, and I think this is the opportunity that other actors in the international community can really show absolutely vital leadership that we need as a collective at the moment.
Right.
So we're not dependent on any one country.
So the U.S. turning away from the the war against climate change is not going to affect the battle that seriously.
Of course, it will affect our progress, and even hearing about some of the rolling back of different incentives for clean energy,
right.
et cetera, definitely will affect that, and at the global level. However, again, I'm also hearing from international partners, including, for example, my other colleagues who are in the renewable energy solar industry in India, how fast things are going ahead. But I think what we need to do as think tanks, policy sort of influencers in all of our discourses, and try to support governments who have integrity in terms of this issue, who want to make a difference, that there are so many opportunities now to forge ahead, despite we have to also be careful not to think that everything is lost, because it's not, even though of course these developments are very damaging.
So how do you insulate the climate change movement over the next 3.5 years? Have you worked out a strategy for that? That you're going to wait for this administration to kind of move on, and then you will, take up the.
Yes.
Is that what your strategy is?
I mean, it's uncertain, of course, what the developments will be in full in the US and sort of elsewhere. And in particular, I mean, I'm very concerned about misinformation about climate is a challenge across many societies, which needs to be addressed much more robustly. But we've been having at the Climate Governance Commission with our commissioners and also at an operational level, dialogues behind the scenes with governments, key governmental actors across major influential states. And the idea is really to how do we go deeper into our shared values, climate commitments, and move forward together in more sophisticated, agile ways, and maybe have some of the dialogues and the really serious discussions behind the scenes with those who are really committed to sort of take some of the more bold actions outside of some of the multilateral processes if they're being sabotaged by certain actors, and to find ways to really move forward in new, unprecedented ways, really, because when you look at it, climate change has always been down on the agenda, unfortunately. We wouldn't be in the situation we are now if it had the legitimately highest priority that it should have had. Yes.
Speaking of which, climate change has been low on the agenda now, and Europe is fighting its bloodiest war since the Second World War, 80 years. To what extent is this affecting your idea of building a consensus when you're looking at countries that are rearming? They're looking at, fighting this war. There's a old divide that seems to be coming up again, East versus West and all of that. So do you think that climate change activism takes a backseat in this kind of a scenario?
Yes, there has indeed been distraction of energy and resources in Europe in particular, and other places because of these shifts. However, that need not be the case. I have colleagues, for example, who have written about, how important, if there is defense spending, how it should be green defense. For example, that's just one aspect. But more broadly, firstly, the risks of climate change and broader Earth system destabilization. We haven't even talked about the tipping points in the Earth system, which could be very dramatic, large shifts in the international, Earth system that again keeps us in this safe operating space as humanity. These are fundamental human security risks, whole of society risks, economic risks that are really catastrophic in terms of the effects on our economies. There's been some really interesting recent studies on GDP damage, up to 19% by 2050 average across the world. So really undermining development objectives, basic economic function, et cetera. And there's even higher estimates as you go into further into the century. So what countries haven't realized, and that's why education, discourses, understanding the science, the nature of the science, the nature of the risk is so important for policymakers to also transcend this siloed effect. Right. It's not one. It's not. We have these classical security risks, but we have these really fundamental ecological climate risks for our societies that dwarf in a way our sort of classical risk. Maybe our hope is also there will be some of these old-fashioned sort of risks and thinking will be cut down to size in a way, and that we have in the sense of not underplaying their gravity, but just putting in the context again of how do we build that international culture of peace and cooperation, which I don't see enough work on that. I've written with co-authors a book a number of years ago on how do we enhance the whole international system to put this culture of peace at the center through very concrete institutions, through elevating international rule of law and building much stronger institutions. Chapter 6 of the Charter, for example, on peaceful settlement of disputes. Yes. We could have very technical work on that, which I think that would be very concrete security sort of measures to really make sure the international community addresses these various military security risks that then to prevent and ensure that they don't mature into the type of terrible conflicts and consequences we're seeing now.
Yeah, and like you pointed out, climate change cannot be discussed in a top when there are wars being fought, when you have hot wars and you have confrontational politics that's playing out, and the threat of nuclear war, which many people are saying. So climate change, of course, you need that. You need peace and tranquility before you can discuss all of that. But, Maja, tell us, you're the convener of the Climate Governance Commission. What is it that you do, really? I mean, how can you make a difference in all of this?
Yeah. So at the Climate Governance Commission, we've brought together think tanks around the world. So it's a collaborative platform and initiative together with a set of commissioners. I believe we have about 19 at the moment from all over the world. So including former heads of state, for example, of Mexico, Ernesto Zedillo, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, first female head of state of an African nation, Mary Robinson of the Elders and former president of Ireland, amongst many others. We have a very close collaborator in India with CEW based in Delhi. So we've really put our heads together to think of what does the international community need to do on this with this paradigm of collaboration, mutual benefit, sharing our ingenuity and shared interest, which indeed is part of our international system now. We mustn't forget the very secure foundations we have in the international community. Every nation virtually of the world is a member of the United Nations, endorses the UN Charter, accepts it as a preeminent instrument, which is a very visionary document still, even though it's over 80 years old now.
Exactly, this year.
So basically, the commission is trying to help to fill a leadership gap with this vision. If we take this shared Earth system risk, the planetary risk we're running, really the fundamental well-being of current generations, future generations, these are really quite existential risks for all of humanity and the future of humanity. How do we internalize both the scientific understanding, the latest Earth system science, but also, try to raise this call that we really need this visionary ethical leadership now in the interests of all. So we've proposed a set of near-term governance improvement proposals at the international level, but connecting the various levels, and then medium-term. So the near-term, I'll give you a few examples. One of them is the full Earth system scientific monitoring. We need to know what risks we're running in terms of climate. We've done excellent work as an international community, of course, with the IPCC and other bodies. We should be very proud of that. Now we have to also go to a next step to get the full Earth system and these tipping points, the risks, Amazon rainforest, the Antarctic relevant ice sheets, Greenland ice sheet, North Atlantic current, which will have implications across the whole globe.
World,
How we must be responsible, mobilizing the scientific knowledge and monitoring capacity we have to report to decision makers at the highest level so they understand fully what the risks that we're running. That's one proposal. Another proposal is to convene an emergency platform that the UN Secretary General has also proposed in the run-up to the Summit of the Future. There's enabling language in the General Assembly resolution for the Summit of the Future to just bring together international organizations to focus their energies within their mandates on an urgency basis to really start to seriously accelerate our action. That could be transformative. And then those are some examples. In the medium term, we're working with top environmental governance experts on thinking about how we strengthen UNEP, the UN Environment. Should it be a World Environment Organization? What do we need in the 21st century? And given this different era, we're now in the Anthropocene, where it's a totally different era. How do we need to upgrade our international governance architecture in that respect? And we're working also on an international environment court kind of facility after these really extraordinary, and this is also on the very positive side, the advancing of collective justice processes, international institutions, International Court of Justice decision, which came out just in late June. How do we take the different leading authoritative decisions of these institutions that are validated by the whole of the international community, and then build, again, what is the next generation architecture that we'll need, we think, to kind of govern our world given our conditions.
Right. But, there's when you mentioned the Anthropocene, I was just thinking about how there's an equally a parallel development in geopolitics. When you look at, the rise of countries like China, for instance, the Russian Federation is fighting an unprecedented war in Ukraine. And, at that time, of course, I asked you this in a different, fashion a little earlier, but climate change, are these issues still on the table? Are they very relevant when these countries are looking at, I need to go ahead, hell for leather, this is my opportunity, I have to seize it? Climate change can wait. In a climate like this, in a very heated climate of this kind of great power competition that you see around you, how much of a challenge is it really for organizations like you, for activists, to push through that agenda of climate change and say that, look, the world is, you're looking at exactly what you mentioned. The polar ice caps are melting. Polar bears are going to die out. The ocean levels are rising. We've just heard that Australia, there'll be 1.5 million people at risk in Australia because of, rising waters. But when you look at warfare and, the threat of military attack, that seems to have more currency, for instance, in exactly as you mentioned. It's taken off resources. Europe, for instance, it's doing that. Asia is witnessing a rise in military spending. Do you think that that's a major problem going ahead? That, this is something that's been going on for years, whereas, we have to prepare right now for the threat at our borders. That kind of attitude is what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So indeed, how do we navigate this set of conditions? And of course, as we were chatting before the interview, we have other emerging international threats that are very, very important, like AI, and a lot of experts are warning really the serious potential sort of holistic threats if we don't have proper safeguards in place. But on the other hand, that's also a tool for our acceleration of human social development in the context of the Anthropocene to solve our climate, ecological problems, etc. So in terms of these legacy great power conflicts, I mean, unfortunately, from my perspective, I mean, I've been writing and working on years about how we should have done our homework as an international community over the last 80 years, basically, in particular, since we adopted the Charter, which had in its UN Charter, had in its DNA this conception that it should evolve. That international law should evolve in a very robust way so that we really establish firm foundations for peace.
Right.
It has an article, for example, on a universal system for disarmament arms control, which has never been realized, in part to save the resources and invest them in human social development. So those issues are even more relevant now. And honestly, the conditions we see now in the world, from my perspective, were not unpredictable. They were sort of, because we did not do the homework as an international community, we're seeing the fruits of that, the very terrible old ways of thinking, the militarized sort of zero-sum, but also territorial struggles, which the whole body of international law and the Charter was meant to resolve and to preempt the resort to military sort of conflict. So what we're going to have to do now is to multitask and to think interdependently across these various areas. And I've proposed an international rule of law package, for example, which is interdependent with addressing climate ecological issues. So I mean, we have to deploy, of course, the best of our diplomacy and sort of other, current international measures to try to solve and turn down the heat and to go back to first principles of, what are our values as an international community? Universal Declaration of Human Rights, basic tenets of the Charter, peaceful settlement of disputes, dignity of all persons, etc.
That's a UN Charter of 1945.
Yes. And then the very important other instruments like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the covenants on various types of human rights, economic, social, civil, political, etc. I think there's a real opportunity to sort of bring together various strands, but then there's also the cultural part of how do we cultivate truly in this Anthropocene era a new culture of peace and collaboration that is a matter of survival now. It's not just sort of a goal that one day hopefully we have to urgently be working on that. And I was talking to one colleague at the Quincy Institute in the US that we may be working with further, but he was suggesting, given these Earth system challenges, again, it will have to focus the attention and energy of the international community. Now it's sort of like we've regressed back into the denial phase, but we won't be able to avoid, unfortunately, the really severe consequences. My worry and question is, how long will it take us to really understand the gravity of these really fundamental, basically planetary security risks, Earth system security risks, and fundamental challenges to our civilization's ability to flourish?
So the doomsday clock, which we were talking about, does that also include, climate catastrophes?
Yes.
Not just nuclear war, but it's also climate change is also inbuilt into that. Where are we at the clock right now?
It's even, I think it's edged, the last update has edged ever closer to midnight. I can't remember exactly this, but I believe it's the closest we've ever been, which is extremely rational to try to communicate this to the international community and to humanity at large. But interestingly, they don't only look at threat of nuclear calamity and climate and environment, but also, for example, information ecosystems and erosion of democracies or democratic health. which I think also are absolutely fundamental to us wrestling through these multiple challenges of the international community. And I do believe we have the capacity to multitask, to tackle all these issues, but we will need a new way of thinking, I would say.
Right, absolutely, a new way of thinking. And indeed, when we talk about climate change in India, global warming, countries like China and India, while we have our disagreements on several issues, we are kind of united on the topic of climate justice. And that's a concept that I'm sure you've heard that, which is, the developing countries are being asked to pay for what the developed world did over 150 years of their industrial revolution and all that. And now we are coming in very late in on development too. How do we ensure that we can go along this path with a lot of inputs from the developed world in terms of technology? And, you can't penalize the developing world for all of this. What's your take on that?
Yes, I mean, we have a number of proposals in terms of how do we actually ensure that the international community as a whole and developing nations and vulnerable nations have the resources, including the technology. And so this is a big piece of work at the international level that will be pushing on further, including the finance topic, because we have the money at the international level, and there's really excellent research, in fact, done recently, making the case to wealthy countries who have a lot of financial capacity, investing now in climate mitigation, adaptation holistically across the world. Is such a good investment economically versus the damage that we're going to see generally to our economies and concretely on the ground. So it's a no-brainer. But again, there's a disconnect, and part of that disconnect is not thinking, as one human family, not thinking that really the climate crisis is a quintessentially international, it's a shared challenge. And the policymakers, leaders have to think in that way, and to invest. And on your point to China and India, and this is, I think, an opportunity. At the moment, we need all hands on deck. And I think, China and India have tremendous capacity and potential to be visionary at this time, to show the rest of the world how it's done, and to ensure that, bad behaviors in certain countries in the West, laggard and backward behaviors don't stop the rest of the world.
That you're referring to, bad behavior?
They're quite a number, sadly, but yeah.
None in particular. No country to the south of Canada.
Yes, Canada has had some very serious problems with our neighbor to the south. But I hope, I hope we work across countries, across regions to find our way through. Because one, or a handful of bad actors should not sabotage the rest of the international community. We have to really keep reminding ourselves that. And also, I mean, for example, at the Summit of the Future outcome, that was not, a dramatically bold outcome for the international community, but still you saw remarkable sort of navigation, stick handling of the international community despite saboteurs. And there were slightly different saboteurs at that point.
Ooh, which ones?
I won't mention any name. You can look up the record, but the collective to protect, because this is what we have to really keep clearly in mind. I was just, as I was mentioning, or maybe to other colleagues, about my visit to the Self-Employed Women's Association that has 3 million members of the most vulnerable informal sector workers, women across India. And they were saying, now they're seeing these flash floods are just destroying all the magnificent work that they have done to just, get themselves out of poverty and cycles of poverty. And in a moment, these climate shocks are just destroying, what they have painstakingly built. So, and so this is across the world, different livelihoods, et cetera, different vulnerabilities, small island developing states where their whole nations are are at risk. So we have to really, and any of us who have some influence or power, depending on no matter what country, we have to really put our heads together and to have to really envision success, innovation. How do we restore, rebalance the climate, regenerate nature? We have to very, very quickly also, again, think in very different ways. And we have technology. India as a technology powerhouse. China as a technology powerhouse. We need the best and brightest and all the amazing. Also, civil servants working really in the interest of their countries, but also of humanity to work together and to join with those who are similarly across every country, including some of the problematic ones at the moment. You still have some, of course, many excellent people to work with
in those countries.
Yes,
and you're not going to name those countries, of course. But when you were saying this, Maya, when you said the world. You need to fight it as one family. We have that concept in India called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means that the world is one family, and that's usually the approach that we take. In not just in climate change, but also for diplomacy and all of that. So I mean that is of course the way forward. And you're fighting something like climate change, which, as you so correctly mentioned, it affects every single person. It's not like any other fear. This is. It's here, it's now, it's happening, it's affecting people, it's causing billions of dollars worth of damage. And these are problems that, really need to be taken up seriously and addressed at the very earliest. But of course, we need an all-of-planet approach to tackle all these problems that you've been talking about, Maya. Climate change, global warming, all of these issues are here and now staring us in the face. The planet is on fire. And thank you for telling us what we need to do to act on that.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. A pleasure to discuss with you today.
Thank you.